This is for Jordan. I miss you. Have I ever told you that I miss you? I probably a lot. I say it too much, but it's too much holding all of this in because I do. I miss you. I miss the you that I knew, but they're gone. And the you and the me you knew is gone too. I don't know who she is. That's what I'm trying to figure out, but I'm also trying to figure out you. You've been through so much, as I can see the evidence sitting right here in front of me, all the trials and tribulations you've endured. And yet here you are, so strong and assured. Time has passed that we can't get back, and I miss that. But we can't go back in time, rewind what we lost. So we'll start again, introduce ourselves. So this is me, Janiya Meekins, freshman English major, doing a project about you because I miss you. And I hope this helps me close the gap between who you were and who you are. I like this you. Can I know more? Hello, good morning. My name is Janiya Meekins, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about me. Um, I have six brothers and one sister. I grew up in the same household as five of those siblings. In my family, there has always been a separation between my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family. As it stands, my parents have been divorced since I was 4 years old. In one household, my father's, I grew up with my two younger brothers. And in my mother's household, I grew up with my sister and my two older brothers. I spent the majority of my time living with my mother. So those two brothers became a huge part of who I am, specifically, my brother Jordan. Here's a little bit about my family. As you can see, this is a little bit of them. This picture, the big one with all of us in there, is the last one we took together, which obviously has been a long time, seeing as I'm the little girl, not sitting on my mother's lap, but standing next to her. It's been a while. It's been a minute since we've all been together. And those two little boys right there are my younger brothers who weren't born at the time this happened. Um, thing is about my brother Jordan is that he is my third oldest brother, and he's about 9 years my senior. My mother had him when he was 18, so he saw parts of her that I never knew. He is one of the most intelligent people I have ever known, and I strive to match him in someone I strive to match in conversations whenever I learn something new. Thing is, I don't actually know Jordan, not in the way that I know my sister or my brother Jonathan. As a child, my sister and my brother Jonathan and we grew up together. We were three peas in a pod. We were referred to as the three musketeers. Where one went, the two were always eventually followed. And my two younger brothers, I changed their diapers and I fed them and I babysat them ever since the time they were born. I'm pretty close with half of my brothers, but the older ones, the other half, not so much. And Jordan in particular is troubling. He was thrown out at 18. And it wasn't because my mother thought he needed to go out and live in the real world, or he needed to learn how to be an adult. It was because he had been arrested many times. It wasn't a rare occurrence for that to happen. I remember one time where the police officers were chatting with my mother. It wasn't a pleasant conversation, but it had a familiarity to it that spoke volumes, and those volumes had a lot to say. This is my brother Jordan. This is the one that I hear stories about from my older family members, specifically my mother, which I'm slightly convinced that he is her favorite. And this is the Jordan I remember from my childhood, the one who was always bright and happy and just loved to be with his family and his cousins and things like that. And this is the Jordan that everyone else knows, the one that I am most familiar with, the hard, tough, smart guy who's bitten through a lot of things. I myself will never be able to watch a gangster movie or a prison movie with the romantic context behind it, or the idealization and romanticization behind it, because of how I grew up and how I interacted with that lifestyle. um I always had a fear of wondering what will I lived in fear, wondering what would happen to my brother while he was incarcerated for so long, and I still do, despite the fact that he is no longer in jail. Police officer, police in my house, as it is in many, signal fear and distance. And Jordan's stints in jails and prison meant I didn't know who my brother was the way that his friends and his girlfriend do. It's simply a fact of life. But Jordan's stints and the distance created by his time in jail, I'm not the only one who's experienced this. In fact, in 2019, in 2019, the Black people made up 12% of the US population. But at the same time, they made up 33% of the US's sentenced prison population, almost double what the total population is. So the question we have to ask here is, why are there so many people incarcerated? Why are there so many Black people incarcerated? How did it get this way? The answer here is convict leasing. After the Civil War ended and Black people were finally freed, after it was mandated and passed and reinforced by national guards, Black people were finally free. And with that came a collapse in the Southern economy because Black enslaved labor at the time was the thing that was holding up was a major force in the Southern economy. So they had to find a way to get back to what they once were. This ended up becoming they ended up using the loophole that exists in the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment states that slavery will no longer exist, is no longer legal unless it is through imprisonment. This means that the South exploited this, and started imprisoning a lot of Black people. This led to a mass incarceration of Black people. It was the first big boom in the prison population, and the first time the Black population in prison outnumbered the white population up until that point. This, of course, they used this as a way to use Black people. They could get Black people into the prisons, and then they could lease them out to people all over the South, and then use their labor to continue to uphold the economy. So, of course, it was just another version of slavery, though still legal. This, now we see today, has led to the over policing of Black bodies. In the 70s, it was seen as the war on drugs, presented by Nixon and reinforced by Reagan. The stop and frisks and the three strikes rule that Clinton brought into into law when he was president, which of course leads in a snowballed into the over-policing of Black children. Black children are 3 times more likely to be suspended and expelled than white students. This is because of the adoption of the broken window theory. It's a crackdown on smaller offenses, things like having a phone in class um, or talking back to a teacher. These smaller things are used as excuses to be suspended or expelled when previously they were not. This, of course, leads to a increase in suspensions and expulsions, which parallels how policing works outside of the system, where you see the stop and frisks and the 3 strikes rule being enforced to crack down on the smaller things. It only leads to a higher a higher use a higher an increase in prison population. It's no coincidence that these suspensions and expulsions, the increase in these, started in the 70s, along with the same decade that the war on drugs started, which is in 71. The war on drugs started in 71, and in starting in the 70s was when we saw an increase in expulsions and suspensions. And so, with these, we see an increase in police presence on school campuses. School resource officers, SROs, were initially supposed to be used for things like for emergencies like school shootings. They were supposed to protect the students, not police them. Now, however, they are being used much more commonly. They are much more present on school campuses, and they're being used as a way to discipline students instead of having administrators discipline students. Things like backing talk and talking back and skipping classes and are why they would call in the police. Which introduces students to the juvenile system sooner than, one, they deserve, and two, sooner than they had been before all of this started. And it's extremely difficult to get out of the juvenile system. Students are 2 times more likely to drop out of school when they're expelled or suspended. The goal of the school to prison pipeline is to push students out of schools and into the prison system. Getting in trouble one time very easily can become 2, 3, 4 times, especially with how harsh punishments can be. If you get in trouble for skipping class one time and you get suspended, well, now you're behind in class, and so you think it's no point, so you continue to skip classes. And of course, once you continue skipping classes, you keep falling behind, and eventually you either fall back a grade or you're expelled. It's a cycle that is extremely difficult to escape. My brother Jordan said it was a mill. Jordan himself has had the experience of going through the juvenile system and the prison system. He was very smart as a child, but still got into a lot of trouble. He entered the system at 13. His childhood was tumultuous. He had a mother who was always working. She was raising 4 kids by herself. Um, and he had an absent father, which is a common story among Black boys. But in 2016, in 2016, or no, Black students make up 16% of the school population, but they make up 31% of in-school arrests. This disparity starts back in preschool. Black children make up 40% of preschool children who are suspended more than once. Preschool children. Black students without a father are more likely to be put into special education classes because they were deemed not behaviorally ready. So they go to behavioral classes. This means that Jordan was susceptible to the school to prison pipeline before he even started school. He was suspended in middle school, and expelled in high school. He had two teachers. He had teachers and the administrators tell him, and when he went into high school, that he only had two chances to mess up before they would expel him. By then, he'd already received disciplinary action. He received disciplinary action 4 or 5 times. By this point, he had already 4 or 5 times. The reason for the only two chances was attending an alternative school. He stole from stores, and so he went to a juvenile detention center. And after he was let out on probation, he had to attend the alternative school. He got in trouble countless times for things like stealing and fighting and possession of weed, but he also got in trouble for skipping school and failing a class and being truant. This experience of going to juvenile detention center made him not want to go to jail. He knew he was smarter, he knew he was better, and he was too smart to be doing these things. And yet, despite this, he ended up going to jail 8 or 9 times. 8 or 9 times before he was ever 18 years old. Now, you might be thinking, well, he was a bad kid and he deserved it. Maybe, but you have to look at the bigger picture. Jordan didn't think school was important. For him growing up, it wasn't impressed that importance wasn't impressed upon him. I grew up, as did Jonathan and Jada, grew up in a household where education was one of the most important things. We were taught that education is the key to success, that is the one thing that is a sure way to get you where you want to be. Jordan, however, had to grow up with a single mother who just barely got her GED at 18, an abusive stepfather, and an absent real father. I grew up with a kind father and a hardworking mother who was working while obtaining her bachelor's and eventually her master's degrees. Jordan didn't feel supported. He admits that he could have behaved better, but he felt that no one pushed him, no one made him think while he was in school. All of this led to him going to jail. He never understood the importance of school, and so he treated it like it was pointless in his life. And of course, he said he was running the streets, instead of worrying about what he could be doing better in school, which of course led to him going to jail. In jail, he said himself, was traumatic, hence my own trauma with gangster movies in prison and prison movies and stuff like that. He said that no one should ever have to go through it, and no one should ever go through it. He said that the feeling of deprivation followed him everywhere. The feeling of deprivation, feeling of four walls, no matter where you're at, followed him everywhere. He still believes that it was God's plan and he's better for it, because he eventually learned that jail wasn't for him. They treated inmates like dogs, and he felt like he was at war all the time because he was black, but also against the guards themselves. He felt like he felt too comfortable because he tested authority and bought contraband, and he did all of this. He was too smart and felt he was made for so much more. He knew that. And despite all of this, going to jail was hard, but getting out of the cycle was harder. He knew he could have behaved better and taken advantage of the odd times he got support. However, he also knew that the system was working against him. He said two things about jail. One is that you spent you they say this thing about jail. You only serve 2 days. The first day you go in and the day you come out. And a lot of times the men And the people in general who come out are mentally the same age as when they went in, which means you have no room for growth. There's no growth that is happening. There are no changes that are being pushed upon you. A lot of the time you're expected to be the same person as you were when you went in, so that when you go out, you make the same mistakes so that you could go back in. That is the cycle. And two, he said this. He said that that the first day you get out, everyone knows what they're going to do. They know the first thing that they're going to do that first day. They know they're going to get that burger. They're going to see that person. They're going to hug that family member. They're going to pay off that loan. They're going to do all of these things. The second day, they know what they're going to do. They're going to go travel. They're going to go sleep. They're going to enjoy themselves. The third and fourth and fifth and 10th day, they know what they're going to do. By the 30th day, however, they don't know, because they don't know how they're going to get bus fare. Don't know where they're going to sleep. They don't know all of these things, especially if they burned the bridges. He said, a lot of the times when you're at rock bottom, all you can do is go up. He said specifically, some niggas be looking around at rock bottom. And that is what they expect. That is what they want. A lot of the time, when we have people only looking around at what is expected of them, what is all that they see, and it's failure, they will fail. And so that is what the prison to pipeline system wants. They want you to believe you will fail, so you will fail. And when you fail, you will continue to fail again. And each time you fail, it will make it harder to succeed. So the mass incarceration of Black people has been in business since the end of slavery. Private prisons support and uphold a large part of the USA's economy. In 2016, when the Department of Justice announced that they would be phasing out private prisons, stock prices dropped almost 50%. But the following year, when the DOJ canceled this idea, the corporations that rule over private prisons, their stock prices almost doubled, more than doubled, when it was announced that they would not be phasing out private prisons. Private prisons quite literally thrive off of mass incarceration, of those in prison, and the labor of those in prison, and an overwhelming amount of them are Black. It's important for the private prisons to uphold things as they are: stop and frisks, broken window theory application, overcriminalization, and the school to prison pipeline. More money for them equals more labor. Jordan knew this. And he said, time is your biggest commodity. He said this because when he was in jail, it was around the time that he could have been getting a higher education. He could have been going into college. And college, higher education, is the most obvious and easiest path to success in this country. By the time he got out of jail, he didn't feel like going back because he felt it was useless. He believed that if school was his biggest problem in 10th grade, then he could have been worried, then he wouldn't have to be, and not jail when he was first introduced to actual jail time, then he believes he could have been in a better position in life right now. And yet, now that he knows this, he takes advantage of every opportunity. He always has some advice for everyone around him to get ahead. He thinks jail isn't a path anyone should go down, but he wouldn't change his own path. He believes that, yes, His life is hard now because of jail, and maybe he could have had a better life if he hadn't gone to jail, but it's very possible that he could have had a worse life if he hadn't gone to jail, which is strangely optimistic. And I thought so. And it was something that connected me to him a little bit more, something I've learned about him because he's just as optimistic as I am. This is the Jordan I want to know. The the one that is optimistic and the one who strives to learn everything about the world. This is him as a father, with this cute little girl right here. That's his daughter. This is the Jordan I'm learning about. This is the father, the brother, the smartest person in almost every room he walks into. That's the Jordan I want to learn more about. And yet the school to prison pipeline, everything that has happened to him has created this distance between us that I should have known before. Things I should have known about him before, now I don't, because of some of his own actions, but also because of the system targeting him and people like him. We have work to do personally, individually, but also against a system that is tearing families apart. Thank you.